the size of Make in India with right earnest few years ago. It was being pointed out by the industry that we can only gear up to meet the needs of our nation, our armed forces, if we know what they have in mind for future. And since R&D, capacity planning, infrastructure building does take several years, a little advance notice is required to plan ahead. And when we say little, it generally means few years. I'm very pleased to say, both as chairman of my company, Mahindra Defense and Mahindra Aerospace, as well as president of SIDM, that I can say without any hesitation, there has been tremendous support received from the armed forces and Army in particular as the largest service to forecast the requirements of future, to share with us what can be the specs, the requirements, and start preparing us so that all of us start thinking what needs to be done in the coming years. Indian Army has continued to be a great supporter. In fact, when we look at Make in India programs, I'm very happy to say, and General Saab, this credit goes to the Army, largest number of programs in Make in India are today envisaged by Indian Army. With the new policies which have been aimed at promoting indigenously developed equipment, in particular, 25% of the R&D budget being earmarked for industry-led development, we believe Army can catalyze the industry to engage in R&D, which will potentially cater to the future requirements, not of only today, running to 2030, 2035. In fact, some of our major programs, their deliveries will go right into middle of 30s. Presently, the value of India's domestic defense production is $11 billion annual production. With proactive support from the government, and in particular, the largest service, which is Army, we are confident that we can achieve the target of reaching $25 billion in annual production. Make in India, as I have said perhaps in other forums also, is first and foremost to make sure that nation is ready with its own equipment. That is first and foremost. In time of crisis, in time of need, we are not held ransom to someone far away deciding whether to support or not support through either spare parts or any other service. Second, our imports do put pressure on foreign exchange. We know rupee is under pressure. If we can make in India, to that extent, foreign exchange is released for other equally pressing requirement. But there is a third factor also which I would like to highlight, and it is that of gainfully deploying our highly skilled technical manpower. I remember, on a personal note, in my own class of IIT in 70s, 75 to 80% people went abroad. Hardly 20-30% are in India. They are doing and making equipment there. Jobs are created outside India. We need those engineers to show their talent, to show their knowledge, show their skills, and make it here. We are capable of doing it, sir. And I assure you, equipment produced in India will be at par with anything best you specify or you compare with. Today, we face many challenges in India, not only economically, but also militarily. Whether land, sea, or air, the country has to maintain its position as a leading regional power, capable of not only defending our borders, but also being a net security provider in the region as well as global peace. To maintain and achieve this objective, our army and armed forces in general have to be equipped with the best equipment which nation can offer. Yesterday, Honorable Prime Minister announced the fourth positive indigenization list. 3 had already come earlier. We believe it is a very positive development. These 4 lists put together today have a wide spectrum of equipment which will be preferably bought in the country. Some of it may take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but we are on the right track. I am confident that discussions today, as well as discussions which are going on parallel with different branches of Indian Army, it will be one with Make in India equipment. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite the Chief of Army Staff to deliver the keynote address, please.
Esteemed panelists, dignitaries present here, organizers, representatives from various industries, colleagues from the armed forces, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I wish to compliment the defense industry and our industry partners who have infused fresh energy into the defense ecosystem by stepping up to meet the capability requirements of the armed forces. I wish to assure everyone that the Indian Army is fully committed to the vision of Atmanirbharta, which is now a reality. The Army is also confident that the Indian defense industry is fully competent to shoulder the responsibility of delivering modern and state-of-the-art military equipment to meet our operational requirements. I think at this stage we need to further increase our engagement to jointly discuss and define the focus of our collective efforts towards indigenization and modernization. We see indigenization and modernization as complementary aspects which need to go hand in hand. Our focus in the recent past has been on indigenization, which was primarily achieved through the transfer of technologies, and then it was Make in India. In order to kickstart the drive towards self-reliance, I think this was an essential first or the starting step. However, it is also no secret that the transfer of technology approach has only given us what is already available the world over and is in use by the other armed forces. I think in the rapidly evolving technology cycle, we can never expect to have cutting-edge capabilities and would always be a step behind the leaders as well as our own adversaries. Therefore, the need of the hour is to improve our prowess and capabilities in the field of new technologies that are transforming the future battlefield. We believe there is tremendous potential in our country, and it is only a question of getting it all together and creating the right opportunities. In-house research and development remains one of the most essential elements of this architecture. The government, as we all are aware, has already allocated 25% of the defense R&D budget for private industry and have instituted many other measures, as the audience would be well aware of. Hence, while the enabling provisions exist, I think now we have to evolve the implementing methodologies to optimally exploit these provisions so that, I quote, we indigenize to modernize. It is with this background that we chose the topic for today afternoon seminar, that is synergizing the defense industry competence in R&D and design with national security needs. We are confident of the capability of the Indian industry to undertake R&D beyond the traditionally organized or traditionally mandated and recognized fields. So the question that needs more deliberation, therefore, is how can the private industry synergize its expertise, experience, and competence in R&D to contribute to improvement of capabilities of the Indian Army while building an export-oriented model for the country. In order to future-proof our operational readiness, we need to look at specific technological capabilities as the focus of our R&D and indigenization efforts, specifically aimed at complex and large military equipment. The Indian Army is looking at large and more capable tanks and protected mobility solutions with powerful engines, lightweight armor, automated turrets, active protection systems, improved metallurgy, and advanced day-night sights. The air defense systems is another area that has much scope for capability enhancement. Multi-weapon systems with guns as also missiles mounted on high mobility platforms with shorter response time, portable SAMs for operational ranges, advanced fire control systems, and modern radars are required for a potent ground-based air defense system. Similarly, we are looking at artillery guns with better delivery system, longer ranges, lightweight and precision ammunition, as well as advanced aviation platforms. The capability requirements are not only limited to conventional platforms alone, but pertain also to our ability to effectively operate in the gray zone. And in this context, a wide range of drones and UAVs, as we are all aware, are already populating the inventories of most modern armies across the world. We too are regularly test bedding and inducting drone and counter-drone capabilities, drone swarms, loiter munitions, etc. There is a vast scope for the industry in this niche domain that I believe is transforming the battlefield. Besides these weapon systems, there is much greater potential in the expanding field of disruptive technologies, that is 5G, quantum computing, and many others that you all are already aware of. I was recently at the India Mobile Congress conducted a couple of weeks back in Delhi, and it was extremely reassuring to see the rapid strides that we are making in these emerging fields. Having listed some of the major technologies and land systems that we need to work upon, and having highlighted the necessity of indigenous R&D by private industry, this seminar, I believe, is aimed at identifying the synergy models that we need to achieve the overarching vision of Atmanirbharta, and in particular, like I said earlier, indigenize to modernize. The session also aims at addressing the commercial aspirations of the defense industry as an outcome of our long-term vision for self-reliance. I'm sure that this August gathering, by the end of the seminar, will be able to answer some of the questions arising in everyone's minds, such as what kind of assistance is the Indian industry looking for from the Indian Army to carry out research and development? What are the methodologies to increase participation of the industry to support the indigenization drive of the armed forces? What are the ways and means available to facilitate industry partnerships and joint ventures between the Indian R&D and between R&D agencies and industry? How can the time cycle to identify relevant and new technologies match up with the capability requirements in the battlefield? And how can the collaboration with the R&D and industry be speeded up? I think we would also like to identify as to what more is expected from the government in terms of policy provisions, budgetary support, etc., to support the defense industrial ecosystem. How can the available routes for R&D, that is the IDEX, the Technology Demonstration Fund, etc., be improved upon to encourage and exploit or expedite exploitation of new technologies? Consequently, what methods need to be adopted to make it attractive and more collaborative or cooperative development? So these are some of the questions I think we can look forward to find answers to at the end of this seminar. To conclude, I would reiterate that the need to establish coordination platforms for R&D has all been well recognized. We need to jointly focus on futuristic technology through efficient and robust processes between all industry stakeholders and the Indian Army. The processes and structures should be capable of absorbing not only the futuristic needs of the defense forces, but also the needs of a competitive export market. At the end, I wish to thank the SIDM for having organized this seminar and adding one more building block in the Indian Army's outreach to the defense industry. Thank you and Jai Hind.
General Pandey, a very good afternoon to you. I'll be very brief because I'm aware that you have a very pressing next commitment. General Manoj Pandey, Chief of Army Staff, dignitaries on the dais, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to General Manoj Pandey, Chief of Army Staff, and the Army leadership, which is on the dais and in the room, for providing continuous guidance on the path that the Indian industry should embark on for indigenously fulfilling the requirements of the Indian Armed Forces. Sir, your presence here is in itself a reflection of the increasing level of expectations and trust that the Indian Army now places on the Indian industry. It also portrays the Army's unwavering posture to guide and handhold the industry towards promoting Atmanirbharta. I would like to reiterate SIDM's commitment towards working closely with our armed forces in order to supplement the vision of Atmanirbharta in the defense sector and facilitate meaningful interaction with services. That is the user and the industry to identify potential opportunities for the Indian industry. Before concluding, I would once again like to thank General Pandey and the leadership of Indian Army for their consistent support to the industry. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. I would request all the dignitaries on the dais for a quick group photograph, please. Thank you, everyone. We will begin the next session on energizing defense ecosystem for niche technology shortly. In about 2 minutes' time, we'll just set the stage in the meanwhile.
and of course Chandrika Kaushik. So, very interesting topic. We are running about 5 minutes late, but I believe there's a very calendar which is very busy. So we'll try and wrap it up by 3 o'clock. Starting with the subject which has been given today is talking about defense technology and developing an ecosystem for that. Defense technology, if you take a look at, basically is a stepping stone for creating a vibrant defense industrial base. And defense industrial base has two components to it. One is what we call the capability development phase, and second is the exploitation phase when you get into mass production and you are able to make those systems. In the capability development phase, the critical part of that is technology development. Now, technology development, very interestingly, is not the preserve of the big and the large players. It is the preserve of cutting across segment of all players. In fact, if you go back and look into the history, some of the breakthrough technologies have actually come out of garages. The Mac computer actually came out of a garage. So the key point here is there are stages in this development. The first development would be research and development. That's where DRDO comes in, which will be high-end technologies which need major investments, and you need state players to step into it. The second part is innovation, and the third part is breakthrough technologies, which are really out-of-box thinking. The way to look at these is exactly the way you look at a startup would look at this. Now, when we talk about a startup, what does bring a startup to come forward? My own feeling is the day a startup sees a light at the end of the tunnel, he's prepared to step in. He's prepared to invest his own money, but he sees that there should be a reasonable time frame by which he can convert his intellectual property into revenue. And when he sees that light, he's ready to step in. Just a mere 60 crores of investment into IDEX unleashed about 2,000 startups in the country. That is what is light at the end of the tunnel. But this light will extinguish very quickly unless that realization moves from the technology development phase to the manufacturing phase. To put that into perspective, that's where the industry comes into play. We were talking about startups, we are talking about industry, we are talking about research and development. We have a very good panel. Representing a large industry is Sukhvinder Hayar. Representing a brilliant startup is my friend sitting on my left, with whom we have been interacting in all the forums. And in between, giving the perspective of the armed forces, we have Brigadier Muthu Kumar. So, without any further ado, I'll hand over first to a large industry to give their perspective on technology development and the ecosystem around that.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Mr. Bhatia. Let me start with, firstly, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and pleasure to have the presence of such esteemed senior officers of the Indian Army for this panel discussions. I remember the day I think in 2008 or 2009, when we held the first seminar for FICV, and the entire thing started opening up for this defense industries. And this was held under the guidance of DG Mech Forces. And believe you me, besides the DRDO and OFB, large private industry were involved, and not one player could speak anything on that FICV part, on the technology part of it, except the major foreign players. And that was a time we were all looking up to foreign players to give us the technologies in various fields. But now, except the naval platforms, which have been continuing, I think Air Force and land, the deficiency has been the maximum what we saw that time, and has continued for the niche technologies as such. But come 2022, yes, what I think General Pandey spoke about, Atmanirbhar Bharat has gained ground, and we have indigenous design and development happening. We have made platforms like 8x8 platforms, artillery guns. We are upgrading BMPs. The Indian industry is doing it. We have radars being made, fire control systems being made. We also have something like Tejas, which is a big achievement. The combat helicopters is a big achievement. That's happening today. But is this enough to go into the next generation of the technologies that we require to have an advantage over our adversaries whom we know? That's the question that we need to ask today. Because what is the technology that we need to define? I think General Pandey spoke about it, but we need to see what is the technology. I think one definition was given by Colonel Bhatia, but I'll give you another simpler systems. When you look at technologies in defense industry, you start from the lowest one, is your maintenance. It's a technology. There are a lot of technologies involved in your maintenance of equipment. Above that comes your manufacturing, which is built to sprint or built to spec. What General Pandey spoke about is a TOT-based system. That is what we did. Built to print, or now graduated to build to spec. Our environment has graduated to that. And then comes the design and development. Yes, our private industry has gained ground in design and development. We are not there, but we have gained ground. But it's the last word which is confusing today, because that is the R&D, research and development, is getting mixed up in the technology. What is research and development? To my mind, when you look at DARPA, then you realize, yes, that's the research and development. They're coming up with niche technologies which will be available to their industry or to their forces for decades, next 2-3 decades. That's what they're introducing. And have we done enough for that? No. That's where it is. We have taken the ideas from the industry or the foreign industry or the foreign countries from their pamphlets, etc., and tried to do, can we do this in India? That's trying to indigenize it. But have we thought of what is our requirement for those niche technologies? We have not delved into that. That's my requirement today. That's the requirement that I'll be addressing. So how do we go about doing that part? We need to understand that when we start looking at DARPA type of model, there is a success and there is a failure. Success, everybody loves it, but when it's a failure, what happens to that one? Because industry, it's a long duration project. You are looking at 5 to 10 years that you've got to get those niche technologies. Who's going to invest their money? There is a higher risk of failure. That's where the problem will come in. What happens to that investment? So companies need to invest. How will you energize those companies to invest? That is what I will look at. So first, to my mind is that government and user need to act as an energizer. For this, if you look at all nations, Western nations, there are 4 major technology players: US, the Western Europe, China, and Israel. In defense industry at least, they are the 4 major players today. How have they done it today? What are they doing today for niche technologies? The government is a player today. The government is energizing those systems to ensure that they are always ahead of the curve. For this, I think we need to, I'll just finish it, sir. Give me 2 minutes. So in Indian parlance, the DAP is the Bible today. So remaining within the DAP, what can we do? Let's start having make one project. Larger platforms should go under make one projects. That's one. But what happens in the make one? You put 20 technologies to be introduced in make one. Can all 20 new technologies can come in the first prototype? I don't think so that's feasible. So look at when you give that program, you look at that these technologies can be introduced over a period of time, can be in Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4. You look at that part. How will you? Then only when the companies have the program and the project with them, he will work towards introducing new technologies into that system because he'll be paid for it. You will have those new technologies. Somebody will be working on it. But today we feel that Because there is an investment issue of success and failure, people are not investing. We need to ensure that they invest, and those are introduced into the service. So that's my first suggestion. Look at Make One as for all major platforms with technology insertion in Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4. Second, yes, last ones. Have completely government-funded projects. Especially technologies are not related to only industry, but academia needs to play a major part. We need to have a special solution, special funded projects for industry and academia to work together to achieve a technology, because that is a critical part of our system. We are not looking at it. We are giving money to academia, we're giving money to industry, but it is not happening. You look at your technology development fund. Whosoever puts up a project to me, I give him some fund to him. What we need to do is, we need to have a problem. Technology development fund will only be given for solution for that problem, and mandated thereafter. It will be used once the technology comes into play. It will be used by every industry, or it will be mandated to be used by the projects, in the new projects, or by the industry itself. Mandated. Right, I'll finish that.
No, I'm not looking at it, I'm looking more at the watch. Very interesting points brought out by Sukhvinder. His issue was that there's a different perspective to the technology. And the key point is that we need to give impetus to Make One. We need to do funding into these projects, because Make One was meant for funding. And those technologies then can become the bedrock for development of various other systems. There were many other points he said, but let's move on. Let's take a perspective from one person, Dr. Shivaraman, and he has actually been at the forefront of IDEX challenges. He has done tremendous amount of work. Let's hear his perspective of technology development. Dr. Shiva.
Thank you, sir. It's a real pleasure being here. I have a little bit to contribute to this forum. I would like to bring out 3 points. One of the toughest things to do in a forum like this, speaking after august people like Sir Bhatia sir and others, is that they steal most of your thunder. One of the first points that I wanted to bring out, saying that for us, not just for the ecosystem as a whole, and whether you're a large industry or a startup, one of the things that as a country we need to learn if we want to excel in niche technologies is that the ecosystem must be prepared to fail. This is something that the speaker before me also mentioned. And this is very, very, very important. I've spent 10 years in academia. I've spent around 8 years now in doing defense R&D. One thing that I've noticed is that the culture has changed a lot. Last 4 years, there's tremendous amount of support, whether it is through TDF, the increased TDF funding, through the DST, DBT routes, or through IDEX. Now funding is available for startups and innovators who want to build products. But the funding still doesn't have a permission to fail. What I mean by permission to fail, a classic example of this is what happens with Lockheed Martin. Everybody knows Lockheed Martin now, everybody knows the F-35, F-22, F-16s. But the F-1, which was funded by the US government, was a failure. It didn't take off. F-2 was continued to be funded by the US government. The US government released 6 tranches of money, 6 tranches of projects to Lockheed Martin, that was the name of the company when it started, before the Vega aircraft came into place. And in World War II, the production started. The ability of a company to fail and still be recognized as an innovator in the ecosystem becomes very, very critical to build the niche technologies. Niche technologies like it was discussed earlier, doesn't get built in a day. It needs multiple rounds of failure. And that tags it to the second point, saying that what happens to a company that has failed? The investors will not stay on. I am able to raise money today. I am able to do things because I have built my first product. My first product was successful. But what happens if my first product is a failure? Do I have another chance? And in that way, there is a need to do both investor awareness and also build these ecosystems in the government where repeat funding goes in. And there is bigger and bigger access that is provided even to people who are failing. The second and equally important part, and this is from personal experience, is that development of niche technologies is a continuous process. The reason I say this from personal experience is that one of the projects that we have built is the anti-drone defense system. We've done very, very well. A problem statement was given to us. We have built it, demonstrated to both the Army and the Air Force. We are in a position where we are very close to an order. But one of the comments that I've been hearing for the last 8 months or so after our initial stage of development is saying, Shiva, dekho yaar, ye R&D ka kaam ho gaya hai. You have finished your R&D. Now you do productionization, right? But what everybody should understand is that R&D is an ongoing effort. The anti-drone space keeps evolving as the drone space keeps evolving. Newer drones are emerging every day. There are autonomous drones, swarm drones that are coming up where the technology has changed drastically in the last 6 months. So the anti-drone system I designed 12 months ago are not going to be applicable to today's threats, let alone tomorrow's threat. So if more funding is not available for the same technology, I'm not saying different technology, I'm saying for anti-drone to build a better RF detector, for anti-drone to build a better radar, if that is not available, then you run the risk of becoming stagnant. You run the risk of technological obsolescence. A very, very good example, again from the Western world, is that today, after reaching the forefront of technology, there has been a $200 million project given for developing new anti-drone technologies in the US. While I have personally got, even from a agency as progressive as IDEX, saying, please don't apply for more anti-drone modules or technologies. We are done funding it. Now we will only do production. You're an industry now. That is a thing that needs to change because we still need to try out new things and we still need to be able to fail. So a project or a technology is not a one-time funding. The last, and sir, I'll wrap up after this, is saying that IDEX has been a fantastic platform. I wouldn't be sitting here without IDEX. It's given me great access to peer learning, to user requirements, etc. But one of the critical things that Bhatia sir started off with, saying that what is most important for a startup to survive is the light at the end of the tunnel, right? So what I've been noticing in IDEX is that the number of challenges have grown up significantly in the last 2-3 rounds. In DISC 5, 6, 7, and 8, there are 75, 85 challenges that are coming out. There are some challenges that are not being well thought of. Now, I'm not privy to what is the decision-making process here, but I think there needs to be a vetting of these problem statements to know that, okay, this problem statement will result in a product that can be bought by the end user. I think somewhere in a year's time, when DISC 5 and 6 or DISC 6 and 7 materializes, we are going to start running into problems where the government has invested 1 crore, the industry has invested 1 crore, something has been built, a technology has been built, but the technology cannot be bought. Like for example, I'll just give you one example. There's one problem statement that was thrown out saying, in 1.5 crore, provide a solution for border management and complete security for 1,800, that's how it's defined, 1,800 kilometers of border. I'm like, it's not even a problem statement that can be attempted with 10 times the money that has been provided, right? So I think there needs to be a little more refinement to ensure that each company that wins a project actually ends up with a product, and that product is procurable by the user agencies. I think these are the 3 major things. Happy to answer anything.
Dr. Shiva, I think one of your very important point was on how do we react to failure and how do we tackle that problem. If there's a technology development, failures are going to bound to take place. How do we react to it? In fact, I am privy to the fact that in Prime Minister's Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, there was a suggestion that R&D should be out of the purview of GFR. The moment you apply GFR, all the triple C's and 4 C's come into play. Maybe there's a thought process that research and development cannot be done under such guidelines because failure will always be there. In fact, if you see breakthrough technologies which came up in the United States, in Silicon Valley, it happened with people who were working with universities, academia, and then doing work which was not under the purview of government regulations. So I think this is one suggestion which could be taken. Moving on, we have Brigadier G. Muthukumar. He had asked me 7 minutes when we started. He also put a stopwatch to ensure that he doesn't go beyond 7 minutes. So next 7 minutes are all yours.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, the maxim called Atmanirbharta is reverberating. Indian industry is not hesitant anymore. The government is not restrictive at all. All this has been reinforced with the Honorable PM speech yesterday. Here I am to give you a few thoughts. I have understood the points that were coming up from left and the right, and I did not include them. I just omitted where I had written the same. 25% of the R&D budget, IDEX, TDF, 68% of the capital procurement being from indigenous. They're all great measures. The point here is how to continue with a robust indigenous ecosystem and an R&D. So the null hypothesis that I thought of is that the status quo ante is sufficient to take the momentum ahead. In a few minutes, I'll be able to disprove that. PSUs on equal footing is a mantra. The problem is with actual capability versus exaggeration. The moment somebody exaggerates the capability, he goes off where? Sivaraman sir, I am trying to answer you as well. The point is that there are a number of product statements, problem statements. There is ample time to clarify the same. The moment, like in Alice in Wonderland, we know we have to go, but we should know where to go. PSUs on equal footing or defense industry on equal footing is a question of interaction. How clear you are before you start. Self-assessment must be most credible so that there is no time that gets lost on empty voyages. It can be version 1.0 to start with, it need not be version 10.0. The RFI stage is very important. The RFP stage, the bid stage, even at that stage, infirmities can come up, reshaping can still take place. I have interacted for the past 3 days with 20 firms, including Bhatia sir, and my whole idea was to come up with major takeaways, and what I could come up with was that if you look at the Israeli industry, they went with the same platform for tanks. They kept adding on superstructures, they kept trying out, version after version. Finally, on the 6th version, they became good. You look at the LCA, LCH, the DRDO origin, or Bharat Forge, Tata contributing to the towed artillery gun. Are they all complete successes? Are they all complete failures? Neither. Their versions after version can be better and better. The equipment speaks for itself once it reaches the exploitation stage. Similarly, if a patient is there, he gets well over a period of time when he is administered. So the industry has to mature, interact and mature. I was in Border Road Task Force. I had to do a very sensitive explosion. At the time, I tried borrowing a stem, auto stem, from a person who had brought it for a trial. And he helped me because it was imported. I couldn't have bought it. Today, in the same Defense Expo, I am seeing it being indigenously made. So it's a point to think about. Startup R&D verticals. For example, I was looking at Rolls-Royce. So in Congo, I found that Rolls-Royce engines were still working for 50 years. They have put paid to that business. That's gone. Now, in 1956, Madam will agree they had collaborated with HAL. And today, they are talking about capability transfer and not technology transfer. In this Defense Expo, I met 3 of them with whom they are in partnership for the same talk. Why are the businesses vary sometimes? Like Mohandas Pai brought out a few days back. ROI, the investors look for ROI, 20 to 25%. Nobody is going to invest and expect just a bank return of 9%. If the industry doesn't pay back, the investors go punish them, the market punishes them. So therefore, I was discussing with Alpha Design, Mr. Kanranga, data patterns. I could understand that they first focused on a subsystem for an assured horizon, marketed it, supplied it, moved into core technology development, integrated it, made more IPs, then went on to integrated systems. After identifying the correct requirements, either from the armed forces directly or from DRDO, I am aware, I have just come 3 months back, and I have seen the amount of interest the DCOS was taking on pushing. I have seen the amount of interest that the YCOS was taking when he said that no empty voyages, don't allow them to go on a path which doesn't end. Let us look at the Navy model. The VESO, 1954, Madam will agree, 1966 labs, 1970, the way they moved ahead, the ATV project, the submarine project. Now what has happened? They are into soundless engines. So will it stop with Navy? I can use it. The Army can use it, Sivaraman sir, for reconnaissance boats. We can use it for special operations. What about the AIP? It is a game changer. Look at the phosphoric acid cell fuel cells. So with liquid oxygen, without liquid oxygen, in rarefied atmosphere, normal atmosphere. You can use it in 10 places. V-space, we were just discussing with you also. You look at him, what had happened? There was that Meher Baba competition of Air Force. We are now using it. The moment you had come up with the swarm drone technology, drones able to talk to each other. I understand that you were giving a presentation to the Prime Minister. Standalone R&D will not help. There has to be a whole clarity on who is researching on what has matured with whom. So we are using what is available with Navy, we are using what is available with Air Force. The Army today, from whatever I have understood, the DAP 2020 classes, If the industry has to come up, so am I going to talk all positive and everything is hunky-dory? No. I could find out during my interactions. I did it something like a case study, like a PhD project, but with a similar little lesser sample. I could find out that DAP 2020, for example, the consortium class has not been actually amended within the defense organizations like ordnance factories in some of the places. So maybe they need to amend it, bring it up. These are the places where vocally, vociferously it can be discussed. Earlier there was hesitancy even in uniformed organizations to talk to vendors across the table. Now it has got removed. I am understanding, I am part of the system. Vendors are permitted, there are processes available. Keep one person, we are ready to talk to you. The mutual, it is like a mutual fund documentation, you know. People say that how much risk can you take? You can't go and ask your father, Papa, how much risk will you take if something happens to me? He will not take any risk. Nobody is waiting to take risk. Industry wants an assured progression. So how assured progression will come in? It is a simple question of firm footing and economies of scale. You don't find F-16 all American. You don't find Rafale all French. They are all consortiums. There are JVs. There are BrahMos models. There are DARPA models. There are models which will apply only to us. There are models in which we are talking to industry and IIT. IIT is not the only place like Juma Masjid from where everything will emanate. There is, if you see the recent competition that was held, Sastra University kept winning award after award after award. So there is a paradigm shift that is needed. Industry needs to do continuous scan, environmental scan, ask for requirements of the armed forces in various interactions, request for site visits, outspoken feedback will help. Interactions need to take place in forums like this. There are any amount of 3D printing technology, let us look at it. I wanted to do 3D printing, first concrete structures. We did it in Gandhinagar. We made first married 3D accommodation. I interacted with one startup of IIT Gandhinagar. I have 1 more minute to go, sir. I interacted with another startup of IIT Chennai. So I had come up with a composite runway traffic controller hut. Now what had happened? Earlier they were importing the machine. Now they were started talking about making the machine. The whole 3D concept is how much length, width, height you are able to expand and reach. Now what has happened? It has become a miniaturized model. The fellow will get up and stand up on the column and again start expanding. Endless. So what has happened today when I was moving around? I went around the FICI document 2015, you were part of it, sir. Parikar sir was there. Some 8 points had been given. DCOS sir, I want to assure you that from whatever little I have spent in 3 months, all those 8 have been addressed. So the point is, where do I want to go? So a quick point is that when Shah Jahan looks at Taj Mahal and he is going to repent, oh, hell of a lot of money was spent. So it is not that all money can be spent. We are not a country like DARPA who can take failures. We are a country where political hue and cry can be unmanageable occasionally at times, even with a savvy prime minister. The point is, industry can make use of our MEAs. Sir is sitting here who was in Germany. There are people who are ready to go with you. There are people who are ready to explore markets. Defense attaches can help. Kartum shakyam. We can do it. The point is how. The way ahead, the answer to my hypothesis, the alternate is interaction, interaction, interaction. Thank you.
Brigadier Muthukumar, thank you so much for sticking to your timeline of 7 minutes. Tongue in cheek, I wish our acquisition programs also follow this kind of deadlines. Coming back to the point, there were 2 major issues he brought out. I think they're very important. First one, he said, spiral development. And the secondly was capability transfer rather than technology transfer. Now, capability transfer, I hope, will also bring in not only know how, but know why, and which is so essential to move ahead into the next stage. And talking about rest of the points, I think it was coming from the heart. Not many people know that there is a doctor also attached somewhere in between Brigadier and Muthukumar. So while my friend Ashok Vadavan was away, people were very happy that they were getting 2 minutes extra, because he wasn't there. Now that he's back, we have to request Sunil Mishra that we need 5 minutes for him to give his viewpoint on R&D in the industry. So over to you, Ashok.
Thank you. And I won't take more than 5 minutes. If we need to develop, I come from Adani, and like any other big companies, we are also large in developing defense and aerospace, though we are new. Couple of years back, couple of years old in this industry. What we need to really look at if we want to develop R&D, first we need to understand our structure, how we really want to do it, how US has done it or any other large country has done it. The way it works is that there has to be few large OEMs, and then there has to be a tiered structure of middle, and then the SMEs and the startups, which then tier up and roll up to the OEM who actually take the product to the final cultivation. Today, what's happening is that, yes, IDEX is extremely good, and there are a lot of startups which are coming in. How is that product going to reach the user, or how is it going to become productionized so that it just doesn't reach the user in India, but you reach the global, is a gap which will get filled up on its own eventually, but I think there's a gap which exists. If we go back to our automotive industry, we used to have two automotives in the country, which use Fiat and Ambassador, which is HM. Today, we are one of the largest automotive manufacturers in the world, but how did it happen? We had the large, which is Maruti, or the large big players which came in, and our ecosystem developed around them. And today, we have products which are not for the country, but for the globe. That is what needs to happen to a defense industry. We need to have these big players who will invest in R&D, or they will be startups, but eventually they would roll up into the large ones in the platform perspective, and those platforms then would be marketed for the country and the globe. And this investment, be it coming from the government, and as a user, you cannot be investing in startups and IDX and saying, okay, couple of, Shiva was saying that R&D keeps developing, we need more funds, but then those funds have to be funded by the large private sectors. It cannot happen that it will be funded by the government and it will be sustained with a SME or a startup to become productionize it. So if we really need our ecosystem to develop, these large will eventually either form consortiums among themselves or put in the money to build that capability. Yes, in Adani today we are building capability. Are we doing enough and more R&D? I would say we are looking at doing R&D in the spheres which we have capability. Not for everything which we are doing. We are building capabilities in different, maybe with the partners or the startup. We have taken in, you mentioned Meher Baba. We have taken one of those and we are productionizing them. We are taking a couple of SMEs who we have taken in and we are productionizing them. It is done by them and we are taking it to the next level so that it reaches it. So to develop an ecosystem around defense and aerospace, either we build in capability like we do it in Greenfield, where we put in an ammunition park which will be the largest and then eventually they'll move into it, or we acquire smaller players. But big private sectors or private companies like us will need to come in and take as anchor in defense and aerospace to take it to the next level. If that doesn't happen, this gap will remain. The small SMEs will keep asking for funds. They may develop a product, but will it reach the next stage? There will always be a gap which exists. So I think we have a responsibility, along with the forces, to bridge those gaps and form those consortiums. And I feel in the next 5 years, you will see consolidation which will take place, and they will eventually evolve into exactly like automotive, the large players, and the ecosystem will develop, be it for R&D, be it for production capability, or be it for OEMs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Need cutting across the spectrum, small, medium, and large, to play their part. But one thing which do stand out from all the people is that R&D cannot be, or technology development, R&D is a different word, that is a preserve of the certain government-funded things. Technology development is a mandatory requirement for capability development in the country. Now, coming back to the point, there was an announcement of some 25% for development of funding in private industry. We need to get to operationalizing that. It will be difficult task. It's not going to be easy if you go by the record. TDF took 8 years to get materialized. It was in 2007 when 100 crores was first time sanctioned in the budget. Then it became 0 rupee, but the line was kept intact. And it was only 3 years ago that we found a model. So there are no easy solutions, but let's go and look for it. And with that, I don't think we have time for questions. So we'll wrap up the session here. And one point which was brought by him, I would like to reiterate and close this session. And he said about collaborate. I had said collaboration will come, but there is a little bit of trust deficit which needs to go. There's a trust deficit which exists in all the stakeholders. We need to remove that. You will find collaborative effort coming at national level. With those words, thank you so much. Thank you to the panel and to the audience who's given such a patient hearing. Thank you so much.
I would like to thank all the panelists for a very engaging and insightful session. I would request all of you to please stay on stage and request Lieutenant General Shantanu Dayal to please hand over a token of appreciation. Thank you, everyone. We will now begin the last session of this seminar titled Enhancing Scope and Reach of the Indian Defense Industry by R&D. The session will be moderated by Major General Sudhir Kumar Sharma, SM, VSM, ADG, CD, Indian Army. And I would request Lieutenant General Shantanu Dayal to please give the opening remarks for this session.
I'll start, don't worry. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us and being so patient in the afternoon session. I welcome the esteemed panelists. I don't need to introduce any of them. They're all well known to all of you here. Since the time is short, let me say very few words, very few words, to take a cue from what was said in the first session. Now, yes, the government is making a lot of effort to energize, to catalyze the research and development, or as Mr. Bhatia brought out, the technology development in a very big way. And we are accepting mistakes, we are accepting failures also in a very big way. people who are involved in this business, they are aware. There are projects which take a long time to fructify. There are partial failures, total failures, and we keep persevering. And at the end of the time, at the end of the expenditure, there has been good successes. And the state we are in today is a function of a large number of those failures and large number of successes which we had in the last few years, which is not so well known in the environment. But to start or to set the tone for this discussion, which is essentially research and development or technology development by the private sector. As all of you are aware, gentlemen, in the past, traditionally, research and development or technology development was essentially the mandate of the government agencies, essentially led by the DRDO and certain other DPSUs, plus certain big universities or famous academia. To my knowledge or to the services knowledge, the R&D or the research or efforts or expenditure to develop new technologies, we were not so much aware in the private sector. But as has been brought out in the first session, unless the private sector led by the large industries contribute to the development of niche technology, development of new technologies, the defense sector cannot progress. Indian Armed Forces will not have that cutting edge, the advantage which is required in an operational area till the time we develop our own technologies which are better and much ahead of the technologies which has already been developed in other parts of the world. So therefore, with perhaps a certain amount of base having been developed by the government agencies, and I must compliment Mr. Chandrika, who is representing the DRDO, while we have a lot of points to discuss amongst us, but I must also here openly state that the base of the research and development, especially in the defense sector, has been set by the DRDO despite numerous challenges, both in the procedural domain, financial domain, as also the knowledge domain. So therefore, they require a lot of praise from all of us to have established that base. And as in the last session, Mr. Wadhwa was trying to bring out, they have become like a hub, like the nodal point, around which numerous other technologies, new technologies are developing. And it is our aim today in the government or in the armed forces to enable those smaller satellites of technology or satellites of development which are developing around and in collaboration with the DRDO to become independent suns, not remain satellites, independent stars. We want a very pronounced proliferation of research and development, and to that extent, reasonably and a meaningful start has been done by us in the form of HIDEX and TDF, such projects with compared to USA or compared to other Western countries, it is a modest amount which is being given for each project, 2 to 3 crores, or now we are going ahead with 10 crore worth. But definitely it is not limited to that. In case the technology or the equipment which is developed is of that nicheness, then the funds will never be a constraint. Also, from the point of view of services, I want to state here, what are those things which we are looking at from the user's point of view or from the military perspective point of view? One of the fastest developing technologies is in the electromagnetic wave domain. Everything to do with that, whether it is electromagnetic systems, whether they are radars, communications, or as since most of the people in the technology or industry are engineers, from that point of view, the field of electronics and communication. There is a field which is witnessing great development, and there is a vast scope of attaining the edge over the adversary as far as armed forces is concerned, as far as we in India or Indian Army is concerned. The second domain which we would like to focus, or we would like development to take place in the area of accuracy, guidance. We have got large number of munitions, variety of munition, diverse kind of munitions and delivery systems. And we have attained them over a period of time. However, the accuracy parameters, especially over long distances, distances which are not directly controllable through direct control measures, those which require intelligence of satellites, those which require intelligence of perhaps UAVs, some aircraft, or even other electromagnetic means, those are the guidance systems, accurate firing precision systems, which the Indian Army would be looking at. Materials, metallurgy, alloys, composite alloys. This is the third sector which would perhaps give the Indian Army a very good edge, especially in the conventional warfare domain. And the fourth sector, I would say, is already making a good start. That is the domain of the drones, counter drones, UAVs, smaller, bigger, different types, to be possible to be used in different terrains, altitude, and such areas. One of the things which is peculiar of the Indian Armed Forces, or which is peculiar for India, is our requirement of technologies which can operate in very high altitudes. Altitudes beyond 4,000 meters, if possible 4,500 meters, 18,000, 20,000 feet and above. Now that kind of a terrain is not available anywhere else in the world. In fact, the Alouette helicopters, which is so many 30, 40, 50 years old now, which is being used by India today, Chetak, Cheetah. I remember when we were young, the OEMs from France, when they used to come and they used to see us operating those helicopters in those altitudes in Siachen Glacier, they were amazed as to how the Indian Army is using it. They were not meant to be used like that. So it goes to the credit of our HAL and other PSUs who did some kind of a tweaking in that. This brings me to the point of that relationship between production and research, production and technology development. Today's technology development or research and development, as we call it, as we perceive from the Indian Army point of view, is not some kind of a sudden eureka or sudden discovery of a new thing. This is a very deliberate, iterative kind of a process which requires little improvement in numerous fields, which is best possible by the people who are doing the production of that item. For example, vehicle platforms which we took from Russia from so many years back, there is hardly any development which has taken place. I wish if that body which is making that vehicle, if they had done little bit of improvements, and there are vast numbers which can be seen requires improvement, by now we would not be facing the problems of buying things globally and making up the sights, the accuracy parameters, mobility parameters, the power parameters, all those things. So I'm confident with the growth which has already taken place in the Indian industry that the research and development which we are now trying to kind of catalyze will also be as fast, as significant and very pronounced, which will not only take the Indian defense industry to become leaders competing with the best in the world, but will also enable the Indian Army to have the required edge over the adversary, both on the northern and the western front. With that, I give the house to the chair with this esteemed panel, and we'll be looking forward to some very meaningful and very enlightening discussion. Thank you so much. All the very best.
Respected Deputy Chief, General Chaudhary, DG SIDM, my colleagues in uniform, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to be part of this August gathering and be sitting along with this esteemed panel today. I'm also a speaker. That's why I start with speaking and thereafter get on to moderating. Ladies and gentlemen, you will all appreciate that right now we are at an inflection point. I recall in 2017, when I was a defense attaché with one of our strategic partners in Europe, we needed designs of some very minor spares from one of the defense conglomerates there. Believe you me, there were major reservations, a lot of no-nos. today, 5 years later, I can say it with assurance that the same conglomerate is looking forward to 100% transfer of technology, set up a base here for a major platform, and meet all our terms and conditions. India has come up a long way, ladies and gentlemen. In the next 5 minutes, I will cover 3 macro facets related to R&D by private industry. And the first of that is what can be seen on the slide, operational approach to defense R&D. The previous speakers, some of them alluded to some figures, some statistics, and we've been reading about that in newspapers also in various magazines. However, what I do is that I take you from now to 5 years from now, that is 2027. Let's do some crystal gazing as to where are we. So in 2027, ladies and gentlemen, to my understanding, the defense budget for capability development would have swollen up to about rupees 2.2 lakh crore. The order book of the defense industry, considering what they have today and what they will get in the next 5 years, will be almost about 10 lakh crore. The defense exports, given the target which Honorable PM has set for us, would have almost reached rupees 1 lakh crore 5 years from now. The manufacturing would have crossed about 3 lakh crore. The budget is, rather the target is 1,35,000 for year 2025. And defense R&D by private industry would have also gone up. You are aware of that 25% policy which has come in. That would make sure that DRDO plows in about 30,000 crore rupees of R&D budget to private industry. We will have almost about 1,000 crore by the IDEX, about 1,500 crores by the services with various routes. And concurrently, I'm very, very sure that the R&D would be also putting in a lot of money onto this particular front. Ladies and gentlemen, they look very staggering. The figures are staggering, but they're very close to reality. This order book of nearly 11 lakh crore with Indian defense industry in next 5 years mandates a homegrown R&D roadmap. It's an imperative. Ideally, 15% of any revenue by any company should be used for R&D. However, today, India is just using 1.7% of its defense budget on R&D. If you have to compare, China is using about 20% as per the figure of Standing Committee of Defense, and 10% as per CPRI. So you say about 15% average, and USA about 12%. We also presume that private industry is also using sizable part of their budget for mission-oriented R&D. However, the figures are not well known. I'm privy to the fact that L&T definitely has a clear-cut R&D wing and doing pretty well there. However, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm coming to is that increase in R&D budget and also from the public and private both is an imperative. But the problem is that the budget will always be a constraint. Hence, there is a need for a focused approach and prioritization. Axiomatically, the defense R&D is directly related to what you can see on the slide: threat perception and operational preparedness of the services. The services today, as per the ICATS process, are in halfway somewhere in formulating our 5-year capability, defense capability acquisition plan, 22-27. This would give out the acquisition requirements by us for next 5 years. Concurrently, the R&D establishments, the industry, and the academia must sit together and cull out the technology requirement from this list. These identified technologies can thereafter be categorized into 3, that is existing, matured, and emerging. Thereafter, we need to prioritize them as to what exactly is it that we are wanting, because money is the same, limited. I'm giving a totally different perspective to you. Post-prioritization, we need to look at the means of acquisition. How do we acquire these technologies? And finally, a timeline needs to be worked out, which naturally will be based on the operational needs, the funds available, and the acquisition routes. We have a document today, Technology Perspective and Capability Roadmap. The vintage is 2018. The next version could be renamed as DTAP, Defense Technology Acquisition Plan. And this may look at the aspects that I mentioned: prioritization, timelines, fundings, and collaborations. We'll have to go into a little more detail than what we have been doing so far. The Army Design Bureau, one of the sponsors of today's seminar, has taken a lead in this direction. and has already come out with 5 editions of compendiums, totaling up to about 196 problem definition statements. And I will quote what Mr. Nayak said some years back. And I'll take your permission to quote you, sir. You said that recognizing, accepting, defining, and sharing problems is more than halfway to finding solution. And we need to work very diligently towards this, ladies and gentlemen. Here I come to my second issue. The second issue is collaborative R&D. Today we are somewhere between exploratory and competitive stages of defense R&D. At this stage, we must synergize our efforts. There is no time and there's no need, very frankly, for reinventing the wheel. Our ethos, unlike our northern partners or northern friends, do not allow us to be unethical. So we need to find appropriate ways of acquiring the existing and matured technologies. As regards the emerging technologies, they are time and cost intensive, as is evident. But good amount of progress on this field has been done by our strategic partners, our friends around the globe. Linkages with defense R&D ecosystem of our strategic partners, and here I mean both by the government R&D agencies as also by the private industry, is the need of the hour. We need to collaborate with them by diplomacy, by monetizing our human talent, by our software expertise, and of course, we must not threaten them. We must assure them of our intentions by going in for possibly non-dilutive fundings. They have labs, ladies and gentlemen, but we have people who can run those labs. R&D has globalized, and it's now time for us to make a grand entry there. With Indian defense ecosystem, we need to look at joint ventures between the R&D establishments, what we have, and the industry. Here again, we must be operationally focused. I'm repeating this phrase again and again, operationally focused, and guide the industry to avoid duplicity of effort. The services, as main users, have to be part of all such synergy models and at all levels. I would also like to say that 2 phrases which industry keeps harping upon repeatedly have to be prerequisites. That is establishment of level playing field, as also competitive in defense R&D. Coming on to the last issue that I have to bring to your notice. This is about the policy reforms and business process re-engineering. We're all aware that government has made some major policy interventions. However, there are some which is right now in various stages of implementation of the discussions. Some are placed ahead or in front of you for your perusal, design and development by industry, an initiative by DRDO, primarily looking at how exactly to go about spending that 25% of R&D budget which has to go to private industry. Special purpose vehicle, and here I am meaning the 3 models, DRDO plus DPSU model, DPSU plus private industry model, and private industry plus private industry model. Raksha Mitra, which is managing industries, testing, trial, and range access, and the 4th PIL, which now totals up the list to 411 items that we need not procure. Also, we have some quality assurance reforms, which is underway. And apart from these, there are implementations pending, things like defense testing infrastructure scheme. These projects will have positive impact on R&D capability development in Indian defense sector and need to be expedited. On our part, ladies and gentlemen, the Army would continue to mentor and handhold the industry, R&D establishments, startups, and academia. Enough has been covered, enough exists on the internet, on the various websites that you can reach out to. You can reach out to ADB directly. And the things have been summed up for you in this slide. We are sanguine, ladies and gentlemen, that make in India and make for the world, using homegrown technology is the future. And please read on the slide what I have written, that for major platforms and systems, make and design and development will be the main routes of acquisition in the midterm. We are sure of that. We know it very well as a service. And I can assure you, on behalf of my deputy chief and my chief, that all our internal policies are being aligned in this direction. Imagine, I'm coming to the end of my formal presentation to you. This year onwards, the financial powers of defense R&D has been extended down to a commanding officer. We've empowered them also to look for an opportunity for carrying out R&D. So, ladies and gentlemen, while we are working towards enhancing the scope and reach of private industry, we need the views of all the stakeholders on the subject. And here I must compliment the SIDM and the ADB for selection of this panel. We have a multinational conglomerate in L&T, a unicorn in making in the new space research and technologies, and at the epicenter of this subject, Madam, the DRDO. I would request each of the esteemed panels to make their formal presentation. And time permitting, we may take questions from the audience. May I now invite Mr. Jayant Patil, sir, for your views on the subject, please.
Thank you, General. I think the subject is something which I have lived through in my, I would say, 3/4 of my career. And there's something which we started doing, and as SIDM, we have pursued this for exactly 5 years. And we said that, General, I want to add a fourth model to that SPV. You mentioned it's PSU, DRDO PSU, PSU private, private, private. There's also a private DRDO model. Essentially, this is a model which we, in a way, have an extremely long association with DRDO. I'm of a generation who believes that you need a knowledge partner, and this is precisely what my experience is, because the entire defense industry of that era, which Jan Dayal very rightly talked about, was the creation of DRDO. All of us as partners truly started working nearly 4 decades back, and we obviously grew in our own stature. While doing 100 programs with DRDO across, and I can say an absolute exclusivity, there's no DRDO weapon program we are not a part of. And I can make that statement on the missile side. I can make that statement on the strategic defense side. I can make that statement on multiple other absolute niche technologies. We have found ways to work together. Just in the morning, rather the noon session, I talked about this relationship, which is amazingly successful in having created so much, has been leveraged subsequently for doing so much on our own. Today we build platforms, at least for land and naval, completely on our own, and we can do that. Technology elements obviously have come, and that's essentially where we say that it's the guru who taught us, who taught us how to walk. That we run and we fly is a different aspect. So a good student, to my mind, makes the teacher more worthy, and that's exactly what has happened in case of our relationship with DRDO. At the same time, today I believe, in terms of cycle times, what we used to take typically 7-8 years, we today can aspire, not just aspire, really have it created, and I'll give you multiple examples. A QRSAM, when was conceptualized, a weapon system was to be done by Larsen & Toubro, and we were given 14 months. And by God, in 14 months, a system from fundamental concept was delivered, and that's what is today doing trials, although it's a couple of years back that the development happened. So it's not unthinkable today to think of those kind of time, 12 months, 16 months, 14 months, to create something completely non-existent. And technology enables it. You actually use good amount of your own building blocks, because in technology you know enough amount of your own ecosystem, your own supply chain, who actually has created some of those. It's only a new variant, a modification, which essentially can do a job, and that's exactly how one accelerates today. I'm giving you a very, I would say, controversial, but a right example, and light tank. 2.5 years back, we made the first proposals on light tank. It took nearly 2 years by the time it could be crystallized. Take my word, mid-April next year, you will have the light tank on the tracks. Now, if anyone can do it in the world in 12 months, I am willing to give him anything. Now, this is a capability of industry and DRDO working together, and this is where, while we can do complete systems on our own, when you're putting things together, you can create absolute winners. Now, this is where a certain different level of maturity is needed to appreciate and understand what exactly is the game, Because the moment we say, no, no, it has to go through every of those processes, we know our processes kill time. If we want to go through every of the process associated with development, we would be that much behind in time and that much behind in technology. Fundamentally, what one needs today, if we are looking at a complete Atmanirbharta in India, and that's exactly what by 25-26 we hope to be achieving, we need to have near models. And I say it for a very simple reason. Our policies today are very sizably what Prime Minister talked of in 2015-16 on Make in India. He articulated Atmanirbhar Bharat, and of course we are now trying to shape our policies more towards Atmanirbhar, the processes of getting deviations and those things approved in terms of some of the equipment which genuinely needs to be imported. It's not that we are suddenly going to stop import. The third aspect is extremely important, that when we want to take it to the world and truly make not just the numbers that, obviously as for policy what you showed is I'm not going to question, but to my mind the potential is far, far, far higher in terms of what we can sell outside. And if that has to be made happen, we need a completely different set of policies. We cannot have the same rule and the same game to be seen, or same set of yardsticks, which essentially will define how will you become a global major. If we are going to be a third economy, third largest economy, we need to be playing, to my mind, a far significant role in the geopolitics. And if that has to be done, it cannot be done on somebody else's shoulder. It has to be done completely on our own. And I think that's essentially where the strategic R&D, and when I say strategic, it's not only defense. It's defense, it's space. We heard Prime Minister make that announcement. I can say that as Indian Space Association, which currently I chair, this was a new body created at the behest of PM. And this is a body which worked with MOD precisely for 6 months to say that the space sector will completely change the way your situational awareness existing infrastructure is. You probably no longer will require anything on ground in terms of sensors, except for absolute immediate kind of a need behind the wall or those kind of scenarios. But in terms of visibility or transparency of a battlefield, it would completely change situation. Now, if that has to be made real, then we need to look at earth-shakingly new ideas. And first earth-shaking new idea, which essentially is there in these IDEX challenges which have been announced yesterday, is an assumption that you are not going to create something by giving a project to somebody else as one company. Idea is if you create a mega platform or a program, then you have 3 tiers of industry which will come in, and each of those 3-tier industries will have different level of funding and which need to be sort of agglomerated, put up together, and that's exactly how it will happen. We are talking of a program which essentially, I know some of the largest of the programs in these proposals run to about 700 to 900 crores of funding. Now, as a country, we have a choice: we fund it or we keep on remaining dependent. And that's exactly how it has happened. Because individual bits and pieces may add up to that 900, but it's going to happen in the entire tree of the development cycle. And that's essentially where the policy is moving. So to my mind, today the policy is far ahead. The leadership is thinking far ahead. We are the chasers. And this is essentially a reality we all need to understand, that we need to start getting out of our existing thinking model, because if we do the same thing that we did in the past, we'll not get anything new. We'll get precisely what was done and the results we got in the past. Now, I'm not talking something completely different. Look at the first RUR model and the first MAKE model when it was talked about in 2005-06. Were we not talking of the TRI's partners getting TDF? We actually had an articulated policy that there's a platform builder. Along with the platform builder, there are others who will need a TDF funding and provide for TDF funding at the certification of an RUR. This is exactly what was the scenario. We didn't have an RUR in place. It was selected, 13 RURs were selected. Date of announcing RUR was finalized. I think what has truly happened in our sector is when the leadership thought far ahead, it was stopped. Not relevant to talk at what level or where, different layers that we operate at. And this is exactly why we have remained behind and we remain import dependent. I remember the same time of 2005-6, we were sixth largest importer. China was largest. Same thing, exactly 1 decade later. We became the largest importer, China became the sixth largest importer. So it's a complete change in scenario, which all of us have seen with, to some extent, call it blinkered, call it our eyes shut. Now, this is precisely where the policy led. I'm saying today is this era where the policy needs furthermore innovation, and that's exactly what, if I think some of those ideas that we can put together and put it to the policymakers, we would have done it all right. We would have actually made people aware of what needs to be done and what new innovation models that need to be created. While innovation is one aspect, we need the leapfrogging. And the leapfrogging models can truly come through a startup. There's a good amount of startup-related initiatives which are today in place, and we'll see that some of them, with the right kind of environment, can do well. And this is where I quote General Dayal. I remember he having mentioned कि मेरा requirement 100 है in terms of performance. Now, if a startup gives me 20, I am willing to buy the first time. Now, I think this speaks volumes in our change of mindset. Our change of mindset previously was 98% I wouldn't accept. For that 2%, I am willing to throw that equipment back in an NCNC trial, I am not going to accept it. And from there to say, bete tune something you have done, I am willing to take it, improve it, do it in the third version, second version, much, much better, I think speaks a lot in terms of our actual movement towards making it Atmanirbhar. I think with that, and the more and more we try and physically put our minds together, we possibly will actually be able to create not just Atmanirbharta, but also be able to truly dominate the world, which truly I believe we as a country deserve. The geopolitics requires that we take that kind of a position. For no fun, Americans are saying it's Indo-Pacific. The Indo comes first before the Pacific. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Mr. Patil. I can assure you, sir, that your talk has definitely given us a lot of confidence. And I also can assure you that we always know that DRDO is at the epicenter, at the center of it all, sir. Without wasting much time, may I request Madam Dr. Mrs. Chandrika Kaushik to please give her formal presentation.
A very good afternoon. Private industry, public sectors, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, all kinds of industries who are working in the defense domain are somewhere or the other involved with the DRDO labs, contributing as per their capability, their core competencies, working with the specific labs working in their domain areas. As you all are aware, DRDO is working into multiple domains for Army, Navy, Air Force, right from major systems to small subsystems, niche technologies. We also work with academia to sow the seeds of tier 1 to 3 TRL levels so that the necessary science and technology base in the country comes up, which goes towards building the technology blocks, which in then turn feed into the major systems development. Coming to the specific provisions on the enablements for the private sector, I would like to highlight few interventions made by DRDO in the last 4 to 5 years. I remember in 2019 when we brought out the DCPP policy, the major guiding force behind it, how do we cut down the times from development to induction and from development to production. So the major thought was, if the industry is a part of the development as a formal process, informally they are always there, but as a formal process also, if we are able to identify an industry and they stay as a part of the development process right from the beginning and they are identified as so, one is it acts as a motivator for them. The kind of quantities that are required are known to them. We establish the production base that is required right in the beginning of the project. And that has made a huge difference as to the feedback that we get from the environment, that DCPP policy has brought out a significant change. Now, why I am highlighting this is, when we select a DCPP partner, we don't distinguish whether it is a public sector or a private sector or a tier 1, tier 2, depending on the system for which an industry is being identified. And depending on the core competence of the industries, it is a very, very transparent, competitive process whereby which the industry partner is chosen. And although Mr. Patil referred to different kind of mechanisms which enable industries to work, but being a part of the government, I can assure you we have to follow all the laid down processes as per the GFR, even though we may not like to do it, but we still need to follow it, and we do follow it. And the value of the system can range from anything, few lakhs to hundreds and thousands of crores also, when we look at that. So the policy enablement is impervious to all these. Large systems like aircrafts will now go under DCPP policy. Small arms also are being pursued through this policy, where industry becomes a part of the development phase right from the beginning. Second intervention, again brought by the government, towards enabling the private sector was the Technology Development Fund. And herein, I think Mr. Sukhvinder referred to it, that there should be a clear takeaway from the outcome of the TDF towards enabling it to building the user's capability. Let me assure you, all the projects taken under TDF, there is a significant amount of takeaway, and there is a well-defined takeaway point. The problem statement is coming either from the user domain or from the defense R&D domain, and based on the clear-cut requirement, only a project progresses. Technology is not, whenever a technology is being funded, it is based on the requirements either from a system or from a capability perspective. And towards its induction into the services, necessary provisions are also now being made into DAP on similar lines as that of the IDEX. How to cut down the timelines from initial TRLs to the lower TRL levels? Today only, in the first half, in the presence of Honorable RM, we have signed MOUs with 10 major academic institutions, where the centers of excellence that are existing in these academic institutions will become the Defense Industria Academy Centers of Excellence. So wherein not only we do the initial S&T part, the industry also gets embedded as a part of that academic industry ecosystem and the academic institution itself, so that the transition from science and technology to capability building towards meeting the user requirements gets further enabled and strengthened. And these identified centers of excellence do work in their identified specialized areas as have been identified. Some of them could be working in propulsion or high energy materials or high strength materials or quantum, depending on the areas which have been identified for them. DRDO labs also provide the necessary technical support to the Make 1, Make 2 process, which are there towards facilitating the Indian industry to develop the core capabilities for the Indian Armed Forces. The multiple interventions in IDEX, disk challenges also, wherever any support is required, is available. Coming to the two new models that were announced in the budget, SPV was announced. DESI is a scheme that we have proposed, wherein R&D funding for major systems which are not, wherein the R&D is not led by DRDO, but by the industry itself. And if required, they can get in touch with the lab to do the technical handholding. Otherwise, they can go ahead and do the development on their own, either on the lines of make one or as a suo motu proposal also, the requirement can come. Coming to the concept of special purpose vehicle, to me personally, the special purpose vehicle makes more sense wherever we are trying to build up core competencies in the area of private sector also, where even though there is some capability in the public sector, we are trying to develop more capabilities in the private sector. Say, for example, in the area of fighter aircrafts. Today, if we look at it, HAL is the only agency which today has the complete bandwidth to develop and produce a fighter aircraft. So if we are looking at building capability in the private sector also, so that's the fit case for a special purpose vehicle where both public sector and private sector work with the design agencies to develop systems, and SPVs will necessarily have to have development and production together as a part of it for that to go forward. That is our understanding of which way the SPVs should be headed, but these are initial days and we are looking at various models. Honorable PM yesterday announced at 75 space challenges, and that opens up another new domain for the private sector industries to lead the way and build capability in this new frontier of defense. Just like cyber, this is another very, very important area. I am aware that all the services are going out of the way to engage with the private sector, the industries, to find out where are the capabilities existing and how those capabilities can be leveraged towards indigenous solutions. Coming to the questions that were raised in the paper for the seminar as to what more can be done, what needs to be done, and those were some of the questions that were articulated in the seminar paper. I feel that on the government side, we can have more joint discussions, brainstorming, and I think Brigadier Muthu mentioned interaction as the key solution to all problems. If we sit down and identify what are the major capabilities that we are looking at, rather than trying to chase technology, what are the core capabilities that we are looking at? And that is something where the capability providers and the people who need capability, till we sit down, we will not be able to identify the areas what need to be done. It cannot be done in verticals and silos. If we can identify what are the requirements and we then start working together on those problem statements, we will move much faster. Because you will appreciate, sir, we started the ULPGM program about a year or so back. That was not based on a requirement from your side. We thought drones being, unless until we are able to kind of make it into a potent weapon providing platform, that's the way to go. That was our visualization. If we were sitting together, maybe we would have reached much faster and moved faster. And spiral development model is already incorporated in the DAP. Maybe we should implement it much more vigorously. Committing quantities at the beginning of the design and development phase. I know it is a little challenging, but that is what the industry looks for. DRDO doesn't really look forward to it, but if any industry has to invest in the development and production of a system, they look at the business case for investing the kind of money into that. So what is my final takeaway at the end of it? One issue that I have faced in the DCPP process, industries are trying to compete with each other in a manner which is becoming negative to themselves. We need to work in a collaborative mode. It has to be a whole of industry, whole of ecosystem approach. If we start working against each other, then we are not really progressing further. We will unnecessarily be demeaning the whole process and going in a negative frame. While competition is good, it should not be at the cost to ourselves. So that is something that the industry has to take care of, because I'm sure there is scope for everyone. There is plenty of work, there is enough to do, the number of challenges are huge, and there is a lot for everyone to contribute. We can all work together, and from DRDO side, I can assure you, any problem statement, any issues from the industry, DRDO is always open, specifically my office, which interfaces both with the industry and the armed forces. Anyone is welcome anytime to work together. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Mrs. Kaushik. And since we already have people pouring in for the next session, we may request Commodore Jaideep for his quick remarks, please.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm speaking to you basically as somebody who's been on the front line, who's been in major defense R&D, the LCA project, and now part of a unicorn trying to make sense of, so I'm like the laundryman's high mobility load carrier, neither from here nor from there, trying to figure out what's the right way. Most of the people have actually already covered almost everything that I wanted to say, so I'm glad that you give me only 4 minutes. Just a few points that I thought have not been expressed in exactly these words, so therefore important to state them. We are not going to catch up or surpass the rest of the world unless we do things differently, following the same trajectory that everybody else has followed and pretending that we're going to be able to do it faster. We're not going to be able to overtake them. We have to follow a different path. Now, what is that path? What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, what is the doctrinal framework which defines how we want to fight, not how we are fighting. How we are fighting yields certain problem statements, but those problem statements inherently come with a immediate timeline, and therefore there is no scope for actually bringing in technology, actually creating technology. In fact, there is a disincentive for creating technology. You have to just import something quickly in order to meet that timeline. And in any case, the problem statement itself is also small and specific, or has already been solved by somebody, some imported element, and therefore you're competing with a fully developed product. So we need to first of all figure out how do we want to fight. Doctrinal framework required. My own very personal amateurish thinking is we need to be able to use technology to increase our mass. We are not in the business, we are faced with opponents who are economically far more powerful than us. They're going to enjoy the cumulative advantage of many years of accumulated capability. We are therefore only going to be able to catch up in a reasonable time frame if we adopt mass increasing technologies. And therefore, it's not the next super duper fighter or the next super duper battle tank. It is going to be how we are able to make our tanks more effective, make our fighters more effective by leveraging technologies which are more affordable and have a shorter time cycle, and probably nobody has done them before. So that's something that we need to adopt. What is the doctrinal framework for which we are developing new capabilities? A good thing to take off on a little bit of a tangent, what is it that small industries can do, really speaking? Now, IDEX is great, but IDEX asks for products, full-fledged products. The PDS of IDEX is product description statement, not problem definition statement. The while IDEX with a 1.5 crore investment is able to leverage maybe a 50-60 crore investment from a private investor, that comes with, again, with a rider. It has to be a product. There has to be a minimum order quantity associated with it. There is no firm commitment as such, except to the MVP. Now the MVP is virtually a carbon copy of the full set of requirements. It cannot be. Just like the PSQR is a full-fledged same format as the final SQR. It cannot be. If you see the only few guidelines for PSQR which are defined elsewhere, they are that without these capabilities the product is just not viable, and thereafter you spell them out into it. So basically what I'm trying to put across is that we need to think about it differently. We need to start paying for knowledge, because unless we start paying for knowledge, you are not going to have people willing to actually get into the areas that need to be got into, and without that you cannot build big systems. Unless you figure out how to have more efficient launch and recovery from an aircraft carrier, You are never going to get an aircraft carrier. I'm sorry, my examples are from the Navy. Sorry, I'm sitting in an Army audience. I think I've just told you that there's a lot more to be discussed. I wish there was time to expand on it. Thank you very much.
Okay, right. Before Shivani comes in, ladies and gentlemen, we have no time for a formal kind of a closing remarks. 4 things we have learned, quick words. Innovative policy making is one. Collaborative approach is another. Increased interaction at all levels, all possible ways is third. And possibly, what Madam said, there's a space for everyone. So we must work towards that. Thank you so much.
Thank
Back
you,
to you,
sir.
Shivani.
We'll quickly close this session. The DefSec is expected for the next session. So, Lieutenant General Shantanu Dayal, may I please request you to come on stage, share a few words, and present a memento to all our speakers, please. Thank you.
All that remains for me now to thank all the esteemed panelists, starting with Mr. Shukla and Mr. Mishra for the wonderful support and the organization of this event from the SIDM side. Mr. Jayant Patil, Major General Sharma, Mrs. Chandrika, Kumaro Jaideep, and the previous session, Mr. Vadava, Colonel Bhatia, Brigadier Muthu. The points have been adequately deliberated upon. Very new ideas have come. All of them are relevant, all of them are pertinent, and I am sure with the collaborative effort of all the stakeholders, led by the industry, led by the DRDO, led by the other R&D establishments, together our defense industry shall prevail. It shall become one of the leading defense industries in the world. The Indian Armed Forces will become further strong and will prevail always over the enemy. With those points, I thank everybody who has had the patience to come and witness our seminar. Let me now give a small memento to all the esteemed panelists so that they can remember this event. Thank you.